just wanted to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you for coming this evening, and to know that this is just the beginning of a new season from now until next June of interesting programs that we have lined up, like tonight and many more to come, and hope that you will come and enjoy them and that they will be beneficial to you as you lead your co-ops and your condos through the year. So welcome and thank you so much for being so supportive.
Thank you, Albert, and once again, good evening and welcome to the membership meeting of the Cooperative and Condominium Advisory Council of the Building and Realty Institute. We would normally have an announcement period, but we are running a little bit behind schedule, so out on the registration table, you'll find a list of all of our upcoming programs and seminars. Please take a copy before you go home. We have some great stuff coming up in the weeks ahead. As you all know, the topic for tonight's program is a review of the interviewing processes for prospective purchasers. And we have what I think is an all-star panel. Dan Finger of Finger & Finger, a professional corporation, which is chief counsel to the CCAC and the BRI. You've all known Finger & Finger from their many presentations at our past meetings, and they also write many great articles for Impact, our official bi-monthly publication. Also on our panel tonight is Jason Schiciano, co-president of Levitt-Fuirst Associates, which is the insurance manager for the Co-op and Condo Council and the Building and Realty Institute. And Jason, just like Dan and the other Fingers, also writes a monthly piece or bi-monthly piece for our publication, Impact newspaper. Last, but definitely not least, we have David Amster. Dave is chair of our Advisory Council of Managing Agents, our property managers group. He's an invaluable member to the BRI. He is a perennial chair of our negotiating committee when it comes to labor contract negotiations with Local 32 BJ Service Employees International Union, and he is the principal of Prime Locations. Dave, I think Dan told me you're going to lead off. You're batting lead off, my friend. So again, thank you all so very much for attending. Please welcome Dave Amster, Jason Schiciano, and Dan Finger. It's all yours.
Thank you, Jeff. Can everybody hear me out there over the thing next door? As Jeff said, this is a topic, and Jason and Dan and I have kind of discussed how we want to handle it tonight. And we thought we'd all give a little short presentation and then answer questions, because I think there are a lot of questions out there from members of CCAC that we have regarding this subject. It's certainly a very, my company, Prime Locations, represents about 50 different co-ops and condominiums. Most of them are co-ops. Over 5,000 units in Westchester County. And probably one of the biggest headaches that we deal with on a day-to-day basis is application packages and how they're handled and the whole process that we go through. And there's been pending legislation, like you just heard before, which relates to putting a 45-day rule on whether or not a board can give a ruling on whether or not somebody is accepted or not. And I think a lot of that is coming about by the realty community and the frustration that's out there with the way that co-op and condo boards, it's really more co-op boards because condo boards don't have the power here to do this. But the frustration that goes on the time period of when somebody applies for an apartment till the time that they actually are able to move into that apartment. Understanding, too, that there's a very long time frame. If you wanted to go ahead and put your apartment listed with a real estate broker and finally get somebody to buy that apartment, now you have to go ahead and apply for your mortgage, go through all the mortgage commitments and everything that you need, and finally you call the managing agent's office and say, hey, can you please send me an application because I want to purchase at this co-op. Well, that's when things really start happening. Already, the person has a mortgage commitment. They've probably been in contract for several weeks, if not a month or more. And now they're going to the co-op board to put in their application. I can tell you, we handle a lot of application packages in my office. As a matter of fact, recently this year, we had to hire somebody to just do application packages because it's a busy real estate market and it's a full-time position. So somebody gets the application package, and I can tell you, probably 90% of the application packages that are returned to our office are incomplete and not properly filled out to what our co-op boards want to have. Add to that the frustration, that the applicant feels that why isn't my application? I put it in 2 weeks ago. Yeah, you did, but it's not complete. It's not the application that my board wants to see. Where does the blame go? Well, it goes to the managing agent, of course. It goes to the co-op board. But it never really goes back to the communication with the person who is submitting the application. And quite honestly, the realtors have, an issue here too. The realtors, and a lot of them don't submit complete application package. They don't go through it. They drop them off at the office. They send them in. They write their check, and then all of a sudden, we're calling them back saying, "Hey, we have your application. We're missing A, B, C, and D." So there's a lot of time that gets drawn out. Finally, we process an application. We bring it to the co-op board, and now the co-op board has how many days to look through that application, process it, go through it. That's where more delays happen. Some co-op boards are pretty, good at moving those applications along. Other co-op boards are not so good at moving those applications along. There are questions that come up. They ask us for more information. It has to go back to the applicant. Time happens, and everybody gets frustrated. The person selling the apartment's frustrated, the realtors are frustrated, they start calling our office, the buyer's agent, the seller's agent, the buyer's attorney, the seller's attorney, the mortgage broker. It's a long, long process, which we would love to streamline in some fashion. I think the other issue that comes into play is once somebody does get to the board, how the interviews go. And we have some people here tonight who are going to go into that process. But the problem arises is you really got to stick to a script. When you're interviewing somebody and you have an application package, you pretty much know at that point their finances. They've given you 2 years of tax returns, sometimes even more. They've given you W-2s. You're really interviewing to see, hey, how does this person, what are they like? What's their family like? Without discriminating against anybody, you may not, somebody may come in there with a personality that may not fit with your particular building. But you really are looking to see how these people react, and you're there to ask those questions which you may have on their application as well. But you have to be very careful of what you do. You got to stick to business. You got to follow a script, basically, and, questions you can ask and answer. And don't get personal. Don't chit-chat. Don't give them any reason to give, the simplest little question could lead to something down the road. And I think it's very important that, board members understand that people are coming to you, they're already frustrated because it's taken so long to get there. And then to get a rejection letter after they've been there is, really hurts them. It's personal. They take it personally. And then they look for every possible opportunity to say, hey, well, who am I going to get back at? And that's where I think some of our other speakers will, get involved with. But I think it's real important for everybody to know it's time sensitive. Boards, you really got to process those applications, get to the interview, then you can discuss it. But to have people sit and wait and wait and wait and ask for more information, it gets very frustrating to everybody, which is leading the realtors and everyone else to try and get this thing moving quicker. The only way they can really do it is through legislation. Nobody really wants to get that happening. Finally, I think the biggest thing is, you can feel free to ask at an interview any financial questions. You can feel free to ask people, I see you made like this much overtime. Do you plan on making it next year? What are your chances? Get the feel for who you're dealing with, but keep it strictly business. Don't get personal. Don't get in trouble. And I'll turn it over now to Dan. Are you going to be next?
I'm going to be next.
Okay.
I'm also going to try and keep this short because I think one of the things we want to do tonight is want to get to your questions a little more than maybe we normally do. We've done this type of presentation on this topic and related topics a number of times in the past, But it's a very important topic, which is why it's something that I think is worthwhile repeating every couple of years or even sooner. The most important thing, the first rule that I would advise everyone on is if you're not sure about anything, if you get to an interview or if you're going through an application, if you're not sure about whether you can ask, whether it's ask a question at an interview, whether it's you want more information on an application and you're not sure, if you're not sure, contact your attorney and ask them before just making a decision on what to do yourself. That will help avoid getting into trouble for a number of reasons. But I'm going to go through a couple of things. The first thing we've done, we've talked about this at other times, but you don't want to discriminate. Whether it's when you're reviewing the application or the interview, don't discriminate. If you have any question, just to run quickly, the protected classes are race, religion, color, creed, national origin, alienage, citizenship, gender, sexual orientation, marital status, children, age, military status, disability. Any of those classes, don't ask about it. Don't go into it, and that'll keep you safe. There are, as David mentioned, there's a lot of information you can get from the application. So that'll narrow down a lot of what you need. If the person isn't financially capable of maintaining, paying the maintenance and the mortgage and everything they have to pay to own the co-op, then you shouldn't even get to the interview. If you look through the application and you're not satisfied when you've gone through the application that this person is appropriate for whatever reason, then you shouldn't go any further. If you have any question on that, again, talk to your attorney, talk to your managing agent, and you can make a decision before that. If you go through the application, they look financially capable, everything looks great, then go on to the interview. If there's any question in between, if you think they might be, but you're not sure about some income, or they had some income that was a bonus, or whatever it was, things through the numbers, and you're not sure if they have enough money, or whatever it is, questions like that, or something was incomplete, then make sure it's complete, make sure you're satisfied before you get to the interview process. You don't have to, you can't really ask about criminal background at the interview anymore, but that's not really going to matter because you're going to do a criminal check as part of the application process, so you'll have that information before you even get to the interview anyway. You'll have typically you'll have reference letters, you'll have employment letters, you'll have that kind of verification. I mean, most people are going to get good references. It's very rare that somebody's going to ask somebody for a reference and it's going to be bad. So I'm not sure exactly how much you can tell from that anyway, but if you get that bad one, then I guess you should be definitely on the lookout. Okay. I was asked to review some of the questions that you can ask and some things that you can ask. Obviously, the financial statement, if there's any follow-up questions on their financials, their tax returns, you want more detailed explanation on anything, you could ask them, if they're comfortable, if they're aware of what the maintenance is, if they're comfortable they can afford that in their mortgage. You can ask some questions about why they decided to purchase that particular apartment, why they decided to purchase in your building, if they were looking in your building, what other areas or what other buildings they looked at, why that neighborhood, anything related to that, where else they considered. You can ask them how many apartments they viewed. You can ask them where they're coming from. If they're downsizing, why are they downsizing? If they, you could ask them things like, how do they like their job? You could ask them, if you wanted to, what their political beliefs are. If there's any inconsistencies in their application, you can ask that. You can ask that. Political affiliation, whether you're Democrat or Republican or whatever, that's not a protected class. So you can ask them. You might not want to ask that. I mean, these are, if they're approved, they are going to be people that you're living with. So you also have to keep that in mind. And it would be shocking to me if there was any building where everybody had exactly the same political opinions, but so that might not matter. You might not care, but you're allowed. If there's any inconsistencies in the application, sometimes their tax returns say one thing, but the financial statement that they filled out says something else, you can ask about that. You can ask questions about the house rules. Make sure they understand what the house rules are. You can ask them if they have any questions. If they have any pets, are they planning any renovations? How are they planning to afford their renovation, depending on the size? Are they planning to use the apartment just for residential purposes, or are they planning to work from home, or something of that nature? You can ask them if they're interested in serving on the board. You could ask them what they do in their spare time. Do they entertain a lot? You can ask them if they smoke. That's an issue in a lot of places, and you can ask that. You can ask them if they play instruments, something else that people don't think about, but comes up and can be a something to consider. If somebody's a professional piano player or whatever, and they practice in their home in their spare time, that might be something that you want to be aware of, and maybe you're not sure how good you feel about that. There are a number of legitimate reasons for rejection. If it's normal, it's financial. If you just get a bad feeling about them, if they lied, if you don't feel that it's going to be their primary residence and you want it to be their primary residence, there's a number of things. If you get to that point and you interview them and you're not sure about whether or not you want to approve them, and you have some question about whether you feel you want to reject them, or you're not sure if it's a legitimate reason, again, talk about it with your attorney. It's a resource, that's why we're here, and it's an important resource. It's one that's available to you, and it's much better to talk to your attorney than to reject them for some discriminatory reason when you didn't really think about it, and then you get in trouble. One of the things about the legislation that's pending, that's always pending and always comes up with about having to give a reason. We always tell you don't give a reason, and the real estate lobby, they obviously want you to have to give reasons, and there's the fear about lawsuits. The reality is, if somebody wants to sue you, if they think you're discriminating and they want to bring a discrimination complaint, they're going to bring it whether or not you have given them a reason. If they feel that you've discriminated against them, they're going to sue you anyway. Or they're going to bring a complaint to the Human Rights Commission. They're going to do something anyway, and you're going to end up litigating it, and you may end up having to give the reason or having to show that you had a legitimate reason anyway. So whether or not this law exists, which is just another reason why the law isn't needed and would be onerous, because whether or not the law exists, that possibility is out there regardless. So you don't need it. You certainly don't need to be opening yourselves up to more litigation. Anyway, I'll let Jason take the floor from here, and then we'll be available for more questions later.
I'm Jason Schiciano. So there's a question over here in the corner, if you're allowed to ask, if the applicant took a knee during their kid's softball game nationally. Don't have to answer that. So Dan told you a lot about what not to do when you're interviewing an applicant, and that's his business, right? He's an attorney. He advises you what not to do. I'm an insurance broker, so I tell you what your options are when you screwed up and you haven't followed his directions. Because it's always better to follow the directions, but when you don't, hopefully, in this particular case, you've got insurance policy or policies to back you up for making what is hopefully a legitimate mistake or error, unintentional error. So what was one of the errors that Dan mentioned you don't want to make? Everybody was listening to Dan. What? You don't want to discriminate, right. So discrimination is probably the most obvious, most significant potential mistake to make during the interview process. What's another one?
You don't want to get too personal.
Correct. You don't want to get too personal. What else could happen with personal information? Who gets to look at the application folder? The board. The board gets to look at the application or the folder, the information. But is it possible sometimes that that information might be disclosed to somebody outside of the board? Maybe it's, well, you shake your head, no, it's not possible. Does it happen? Absolutely. People make mistakes, right? They hit reply all to an email, and it goes to the whole co-op instead of just the board. That happens all the time, right? Or you leave a folder somewhere, or a laptop computer, or your PDA is stolen. There's a lot of different scenarios that could happen where that information, that private, confidential information gets released. So there's discrimination, and another potential mistake is release of private information, confidential information. So what are the two insurance policies that would respond to those types of claims? Anyone? The D&O policy, the directors and officers policy. And what about information? What about if you accidentally forward an email, or somebody gets into your computer? Cyber insurance, right? Cyber insurance, which is sort of a general word for a policy that's actually more appropriately titled cyber and data breach insurance. So there are handouts on your tables, and I'm not going to reread every word that I've written here, but for the D&O policy, it's going to respond to a claim, which is a monetary or non-monetary demand for a wrongful act. So what the key is, what is a wrongful act with respect to this interviewing process? And that can be any error, alleged or actual error, misstatement, libel, slander, defamation, or discrimination, those types of things, or a breach of somebody's right to privacy. And then a loss, obviously, if somebody comes at you and sues the board for a release of private information, or for libel, slander, for defamation, the insurance policy will pay any obligations that you're legally obligated to pay, any awards or judgments to a person, and will also pay for your legal defense. However, if a body like the Human Rights Commission investigates you and you have to hire an attorney, that defense by that attorney will be paid for. But if you get fined or penalized by a body like the Human Rights Commission, those fines will not be paid. Fines and penalties are not something that insurance responds to. Similarly, with a cyber data breach policy, it's going to pay for a monetary demand by somebody who's claimed that you made a wrongful act for something like a security breach of personally identifiable information. That could be name, address, social security number, bank account. I mean, you've got their bank statements, you've got possibly credit card information. So a lot of personally identifiable information that in the wrong hands, like so many are aware of the Equifax breach. I mean, they can get into anything, anywhere, at any time at this point. Those types of breaches of personally identifiable information by an electronic means are what's going to be responded to by a cyber or data breach policy that has a liability coverage component to it. Similarly to the D&O, it doesn't cover fines or penalties. So those are the two key insurance policies you're going to respond to if you have an unfortunate mistake in your interviewing process and your evaluation process. And with that, I think we'll open up to questions. Thank you.
If during the interview, as you said, somebody comes in, they're smoking a cigar, swinging a bottle of scotch, and I guess it depends on the scotch, but and you say, I don't like this guy, but he happens to be in a protected class, and he sues. Should there be an informal record of why, or you don't want to keep that record, just keep it in your head? In the event that someone does a civil rights suit.
I mean, if somebody brings a civil rights suit, you can talk to your attorney and you can have a discussion with your attorney and you can say, well, we protected him, but it's not because of whatever protected class, it's because he was,
But should there be a record someplace that's the reason?
I think if that person did that, you'll probably have a pretty good recollection. I wouldn't start keeping a record. I mean, if you get the suit and your attorney says, okay, send me a letter as to why exactly you did it, then you can handle it that way. But You know, I wouldn't get into keeping records in every case just in case, you know.
You mentioned you can't ask about children, but can't you ask who's going to be living in the apartment?
Yes. And you should interview them. Oh, sorry. Okay, the question was, I said you can't ask about children, but can you ask about who's going to live in the apartment? The answer is yes. You can ask who's going to live in the apartment, and you can ask that anybody who's going to be living in the apartment be present at the interview. And you should actually try to have anybody, if they list on the application, usually there's something on the application, who else is going to be living in the apartment, you know, it's not just you, and they'll list, you know, whoever else it is. And you should request that those people, you know, whatever age they are, wherever they are, if they're going to be living in the apartment, you want to meet them. You want to get to know these people. You know, I know we're saying don't make it too personal, but, you know, in some ways you do want to make it personal. You want to get to know these people personally. You already know how much money they make. You already know their financial background, you know, and a lot of stuff about them, where they used to live, you know, who their employer is. You know all that stuff from their application. Now you want to find out if you think that they're going to be the person you want living next to you or above you or below you or anything like that.
There was something far right side.
Yeah.
When we're trying to make an informed decision on debt-to-income ratios, can we ask about tuition for private schools or religious schools, colleges, etc.? That has a definite impact on if they're going to be able to afford the maintenance.
That's a good question. Honestly, I would have to look into that. I don't know that off the top of my head. I would say you put on your application and you have their normal monthly expenses, their normal debts, and you know, and they list it. And it's, you know, so I think you probably could. I wouldn't ask specifically about the different things, but you ask them what their, you know, their normal expenses and debts are. All their, you know, they're supposed to list it like a financial statement, and you'll be getting a lot of it anyway because. Again, you'll see their financial statement, you'll see their tax return. So you don't have to ask them specifically about it, but you're going to see those expenses. You're going to see, if you look into their tax return and you look into their financial statement, you're going to see where the money's going to, what they're paying for, and where the money's going to.
Even their bank statement.
Even their bank statements, right. I
guess based on what you're saying, it's probably a good idea to hand packages off directly to other board members, not to leave them at the front of the door and stuff like that. That makes certainly a lot of sense.
That's either a Jason question or a question.
Right? But I guess they
Well,
actually...
typically, okay, for one thing, sorry, I'll say this, but typically, you wouldn't just have an application be left at a door. I'm not sure if you mean coming from the applicant or when...
No, management drops the ball,
well,
on sharing with another board member. I mean, obviously, it should be, based on what you're saying, it should be handed off specifically. So maybe Dan asked you to answer, how long should we preserve records? What should we keep? Should we keep applicants that we have denied? Should we keep applicants that we have approved? Should we keep the entire package? Should we destroy specific evidence of Social Security, et cetera, et cetera? What should we be keeping and how long?
Okay, I think that's partly me and then partly Jason, actually. And from my perspective, generally the standard, it's not entirely the standard that you have to adhere to, but the standard that I adhere to with records is 7 years. That's if I was handling the litigation, I as an attorney am supposed to keep the records for 7 years. I would say you do not want, if you have 6 board members that are each getting a copy of the application, generally speaking, I don't think you want to, after the interview and after everything's said and done, I don't think you really want 6 copies of that lying around. I would think you would want to hold on to at least 1 full copy of everything. Let me turn it over to Jason.
Well, yeah, a couple of points on it. First of all, some of you may be thinking on the cyber liability thing, well, all of our information in our packet is all paperwork. We don't email it around, so there's no exposure. Obviously, there's exposure if that file gets left somewhere or taken. So certain cyber and data breach policies will also cover documentation that's in hard copy format, not electronic format. But you need to be familiar with what your policy covers and doesn't cover. And the other thing in terms of how long you keep something or what are you supposed to keep, the good news for you all is that insurance policies in general don't deny claims or exclude claims if you made the mistake of not keeping something for 7 years and you only kept it for 5, or you kept the information on the files that you accepted but not the ones you rejected. The insurance is for when you make mistakes. You're supposed to follow the best practices, talk to your attorney, talk to your managing agent, but if you make a mistake, that's what the insurance is for. Of course, you don't want to say, well, I don't have to follow any of the rules, I always have the insurance. Eventually you have so many claims, you'll be paying 10 times more for the insurance than you're supposed to, or you won't get insurance at all.
And Dan, just we keep packages for those we approve and deny?
I would keep them for everyone. Yeah.
Let me just add to that we always keep, as a managing agent, a record of every package that comes in, whether it's approved or not denied. We prefer that board members, especially those boards where they get multiple packages, do not keep those packages. We like to collect them back and make sure that they are properly disposed of. Properly disposed of doesn't mean toss them in the dumpster once a year, which I've seen happen. So I think you got to be very cognizant of, how your packages are distributed. The biggest question I get asked all the time is, why don't you just email us the packages to the board? It'd be a lot simpler. I don't know where those emails are going to go. I don't know if, you're emailing late at night and you accidentally send a package to somebody else. So we, as a practice, will not email a board package. We will make ideally we'd like to drop off 1 copy or 2 copies to a board and then have them circulate it and then collect them back at the end of the interview process. Because we will keep a permanent copy. But keep in mind, the board itself, especially in some smaller co-ops, boards change all the time, information goes all over the place, they really don't have an office where to keep these things securely within the building. So you really got to think about that. And not only because you might get sued or somebody might get a security breach, but it is a problem if somebody's information gets out there. And there's so much information in those packages, it's a real big problem. So I think that's one of the biggest issues we face in dealing with how can we distribute these things better and quicker. And the point is, I guess, boards, if you get 1 package, you get 2, circulate them, go through them, spend the time, and don't just sit on them to the last minute until the interview date is coming. Go through them and then get rid of them in a proper manner. And that means give it back to the managing agent and let them take it to the office to shred. Hey.
You had mentioned that we can't ask about criminal background in the interview. We asked that on the application. Is that still okay?
Yeah, that's okay. You're getting the criminal background check.
Right.
So.
But then in the interview, some people bring that up.
If they bring it up, you listen to them and listen to what they have to say. Look, there's nothing, if somebody brings something up to you, or somebody starts talking to you about something, you don't have to stop them and say, well, you can't go there. They're talking about it, but don't elaborate on it, don't ask for, don't go into it, don't ask further questions, don't initiate that conversation.
Okay, thank you.
That is not each question, but one is,
Okay.
we've been getting a lot of letters of reference.
Karen, I'm sorry, can we ask you to please stand so we can have you?
Yeah.
So we've been getting a lot of letters of reference that are typed, and they have some kind of a template, and it's it looks like a person is writing the same letter, and then they're not signed. We have a right to say, to send them back and say, no, you have to submit signed letters.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Otherwise, anybody could write the letter. You have no idea who's writing it. Should be signed.
Janet Henry, I also are on the board of River Edge, sit on the business committee. I have 2 questions. Number 1, we've had a couple of issues lately with insurance, and I'm talking about building insurance and my personal insurance. Get the impression that people think when they live in a co-op that insurance for the building covers everything that happens that's wrong in their car. I can fall asleep at night, car goes, on fire, or a match, a flood. So we've had a few floods in the past few months. The person is not carrying personal insurance, homeowners, co-op, condo, whatever they're calling it these days. And some of them are carrying a mortgage. I was always under the impression that if you have an outstanding mortgage, on your co-op or condo, that you would have to carry a basic liability policy. Is that true or not?
Okay, just in case anybody didn't hear, the question has to do with insurance and whether the fact that you have a mortgage means that you have to carry personal liability insurance.
Homeowners.
Homeowners insurance. I'm going to defer to Jason on this.
Yeah, so the lender will typically require, in order to close the loan, a property policy to make sure that the property that they're loaning the money on, the actual unit, has insurance. The thing is, some lenders, to your point, don't always follow up year after year after year for continued evidence of that insurance in order, if the mortgage is getting paid, they're not necessarily going to follow up for that proof of insurance.
But they're not like a condo where they have to present a homeowner's policy, let's say in closing on your mortgage. I'm using Wells Fargo as the bank of choice right now. We have an instance with a person who had a major flood that affected these 5 units underneath him. And the thing is, we find out he is carrying a mortgage, and Wells Fargo, I don't think, understands the difference between co-op and condo, where they're not putting money away in escrow based on a mortgage. This man does not have personal insurance.
When did that person purchase?
Last year.
A year ago.
Oh.
It never had insurance.
Typically, I would think they would, but I guess it just depends on the bank. It's not every bank in every circumstance. It's a co-op, like you said, so it's different.
Okay, so not to belabor the point, we have several people we found that don't, because it's not a question that's out there. And lately, with the interviews, we have made that suggestion, do you have, whether you're coming from a rental or a previous home or a co-op, do you have a personal insurance policy on your unit? And most people are saying yes, but it's not a question that you can force them to carry.
Well, you can pass a rule to require them to have insurance. You certainly can do that. And it's out defer to David, but you can have the managing agent, follow up. I mean, that becomes part of their responsibilities, not they have to do their responsibilities, but to follow up on a yearly basis and make sure that each person has their insurance. And whatever the set time is each year, they have to provide a copy of their certificate of insurance to the managing agent. You can enforce that, sure.
Really?
With a rule, you have to pass a rule. You might, depending on your situation, you might have to amend the bylaws. It depends on the situation. But if you do it correctly, depending on what your plan says and everything, and your lease, and then yeah.
I've heard it. I know the co-ops folks will also the same thing. They ask for confirmation on a yearly basis.
I think the biggest problem you have is that most co-ops, when they were converted in the offering plans, and you proprietary leases from the times of the conversion, which a lot of them were back in the 80s, and so that wasn't a requirement in the lease. So in order to really enforce it, you're going to have to, amend the proprietary lease or bylaws, right, to actually enforce. You could request it, you could ask for it, but if somebody decides to be, and I'll be blunt, stupid enough not to have the insurance, then there's not a lot you can really do to enforce it. You certainly couldn't put them in legal to fault them or something. So that's where it becomes a little bit of an issue.
Something I mentioned to David after we chatted earlier. Is it advisable? Should we set minimum standards for an application process, pre-application process? This has come up several times. Should we be asking for a minimum of 700 credit score? Should we be asking for minimum income? Or a certain ratio numbers must be met, et cetera, et cetera? Or if we look at the package as an entire package, since every single package is different in many, many ways.
If you want to be able to reject a person because they don't have a minimum credit score, then the answer is yes. So for all of those things you listed, if you want to use that as a basis, whether it's the credit score or the debt-to-income ratio or the loan-to-value ratio, whatever the different ratios are that you guys use and you look at, I would say yes, you should have minimums and you should stick to that. And if and you can look, if you have somebody that's really close where, they're 100th off on the ratio, you can look at it and you can maybe make an exception and you can maybe decide, well, if they put, 6 months maintenance in escrow for 2 years, then we'll make an exception or something like that. You can kind of work it out if they're otherwise a great candidate, whatever. But you should have those minimums, and if you can have them, then you should also be prepared to adhere to them. So that if the person doesn't meet those requirements, those thresholds, then you deny the application.
Should we disclose those requirements before the application is submitted to the seller, buyer, etc.? Or should we keep that internally just for the board?
You should disclose it. You can disclose it. There's nothing wrong with that. It helps. Look, if nothing else, it helps the process so the people that are buying in, they know right away, they know at the outset what your guidelines are, whether they're going to pass. Helps avoid wasting everybody's time.
Right. I have 2 questions for you. Can we ask them if they plan to renovate?
Yes.
Can we ask them their work history?
Yeah, you're getting a bunch of their work history from the application to begin with. You're finding who their employer is. You're getting a letter of reference from their employment.
Right, but what if they've only been there a year or 2?
You can ask what they,
Ken Gillenbeck from Hudson Park, office in New Rochelle. I know I touched on this earlier with you at the table. The application, we do a background check on the applicants.
Right.
We've been finding that after the applicants have been approved, they move into their apartment, and then somebody else is living in their apartment, which we know is legal. The problem is there's no background checks on that person, and therefore we have a security problem. And I was wondering if there's anything the board can do to alleviate that problem.
That's an excellent question. It's a problem I've heard in other places as well. And it is, unfortunately, there's not a good answer. They're supposed to bring whoever's going to be living there to the interview. You ask that on the application, and they're supposed to disclose on the application who's going to be living there. The unfortunate thing is that under New York state law, a person's family is allowed to live with them, and they're allowed to have one roommate. So, they can move in, and whether it's a day, a year, or 5 years, if they then decide to have a roommate, that person can, they can have a roommate. And look, there's not really a good solution anyway. It sounds, and I'm not saying you're absolutely 100% right, but it sometimes sounds worse than it is, because it could also be a situation as simple as somebody buys an apartment as a single person, and a couple years later they get married. And then, so their now wife moves in with them, and then they have a couple kids. Now they have kids, obviously it happens.
I'm basically specifically saying that somebody moves in as a single person,
right,
and somebody of a different name, and I know that's happening a lot now with even marriages.
Right.
But we have no idea who those people are. All of a sudden we see them walking through the hallways, we don't know who they are, and we're concerned about the security of these apartments.
It's not a good answer. No, you got to do your best when you're looking at the application to go through it, see if based on the application it looks like there's somebody else in their lives, and then you can ask them at the interview who's going to be living in the apartment. We would go into specifically like questions about their familial status and stuff like that, but as a general question. And you gotta hope that they're telling the truth. There are the instances, and I can't say it's extremely rare, but there are the instances where that happens, and you just have to, hope and believe that most people are going to be honest about it.
And therefore, there's no recourse at the board.
There's just no recourse. Yeah, the reason there's no recourse is because they're allowed to have a roommate under New York State law. So once they've closed and bought the apartment and they own the shares and they're on the lease, the fact that they lied at the interview. You can't undo the transaction.
That's what I was trying to address too, is that we can't do a criminal background search on these people. And unfortunately, most people that do close on their apartments remember 3 or 4 days later that, oh yeah, there is somebody that's going to move in.
Yeah,
Don't get an apartment space.
Good question. Let me turn to that question.
You have anything you want to elaborate on that?
We'll take it sometime.
We have
is now a non-smoking co-op. And the applicant is supposed to sign that letter and return it.
Right.
Now, we don't have it in the package when it comes back. Or we do have it, and at the interview, we can say, do you smoke? We ask that because we are a non-smoking building.
I assume you have a rule somewhere that says that you're a non-smoking building.
Yes.
So,
We made a resolution.
being a smoker is not a protected class. If anybody couldn't hear, the question had to do with smoking, and they have a letter asking people, they have a rule that says that they're a non-smoking co-op, they have a letter people are supposed to sign and return, so what happens if they don't return it, or if they return it, but then it turns out that they are smoking. Well, if they don't return it, it's easy. You don't process the application until it's complete, and then, it's not complete until they have that signed letter. If they sign it and they close and they move in, well, you have a rule saying that it's a non-smoking co-op. So then, you enforce it, you terminate their lease. But yeah, smoking is not a protected class.
I have two things. One is a follow-up to what Clementine said. I'm definitely on my mind. St. Louis one time. We have become a non-smoking building for new shareholders. Does the situation change if we've grandfathered existing shareholders? Does that create an added complication with a new shareholder who said, no, we don't smoke, and then turns out?
I can't promise you what a judge would do. I think you're probably okay. I mean, there's grandfathered situations that happen all the time. It happens when buildings become no-pet buildings.
Yeah.
They can't, I mean, that part of that is by law, so it's not quite an even analogy, but, there are other situations certainly where people make rules, but they grandfather the existing situation. So I don't think that's specifically.
My other question is actually...
Well, right, yes, except the therapy pets. But that's not really considered a pet, so.
Well, my original first question was going to be a former shareholder, somebody who moved out not that long ago, was complaining to me that we should be looking people up on social media. She said employers do it all the time, colleges do it, we should be checking people out. Do you have any thoughts on that subject?
I'm not really sure, honestly, how I feel about it. It's kind of a new, social media has been around for a while, but it's kind of a new, really a new frontier. And in some ways, I would say you can ask them for an authorization, to go on and do a social media check, something like that, and then you go on to their page. Because one of the problems is, depending on who the person is, some people, you can only see their page if you're friends or, whatever it is. So, I would say probably if you get their authorization and you do it for everybody as a uniform thing, you're probably okay.
Well, all I would say is that from an insurance standpoint, if you somehow got that information and used it or denied the purchase of an apartment because of it, and somebody came back at you and sued you because you used the information incorrectly, you discriminated against them inappropriately, that your insurance should respond to that. That's what the insurance would be there for, to that type of.
Caesar, you've had your hand up for a while.
On the smoking thing, this came up once before, and I had the impression that a co-op could limit the smoking in the common areas, but not in the unit itself.
You can limit it in a unit.
Okay?
With the right rule and the right, bylaw, you may have to amend the bylaws or amend the proprietary lease, but if you do a private lease, you have to amend the lease, I think. But if you did it correctly, you can, you can do that. Smoking is not a protected class.
Can't you just Google anybody? Can't you just Google it on Facebook, anybody? Do you have protection on that or permission?
I guess you can, but
They're blocked, so you can't see anything. But we just had a recent thing where, well, let's look at this or let's look at that, and you can find out that they're not anymore.
you can do a lot of things. You can do a lot of things without asking. It doesn't necessarily make it okay. You can do, if I go to the right person, I can do a criminal background check I can get a lot of information from a private investigator without getting authorization. That doesn't make it okay. The problem is you're looking to get information to use for the application process. So, if the question is what is physically possible to do, there's a lot of things that are physically possible to do. If the question is how are you best legally protected, the answer would be get an authorization and then get them to friend you or whatever has to be done so that you can actually see, what they posted, what it is. Again, you don't want to discriminate, so you can't look at it and then based on whatever their likes are or whatever their, things they've shared, discriminate. But if that helps you find out that they play music every night, really loud or, whatever it is, then that's one thing. It's a difference.
I just think that sometimes people are less than forthcoming.
Yes, you're right. Very few people go to an interview with the idea that they're going to bomb it intentionally. Most people, they put on some nice clothing and they, they say the right things. Yes.
This is why you should probably stop taking selfies all the time. Yes.
My name is David Walsh. I'm on the board of directors of Capital South and Irvington and on the interview committee. I'd like to ask about emotional service animals.
That's a whole topic.
We've done presentations on that. Okay, the short answer, the question was, can I guide him on where to go to look for information about emotional support animals? I've literally done entire presentations to CCAC on that, so it's not really a short answer, unfortunately, but there's a lot of information. There's Human Rights Commission has guidelines, our office has information. Generally, an emotional support animal is not considered a pet. You have the right to ask for the person, if somebody's requesting that, you have the right to have them fill out an application for a reasonable accommodation. If they provide you the effort to fill out the application, you get the information, you get their doctor's note, saying that they need it with all the right buzzwords, which is not very difficult to get, then you pretty much have to grant them the accommodation. So this day and age, if somebody wants an emotional support animal, they can pretty much have it. And you're not allowed to limit the breed, you're not allowed to limit the size. Whatever type of dog they want can be an emotional support animal.
What about specific applications? Do you have that?
I do. That's a good idea.
We have time for one more question.
She's had her hand up for a while.
Excuse me, I'm on the admissions committee for my co-op, and over the years, we've had people on the board be unhappy about the selling price of an apartment and felt that we should have refused the sale because of the selling price. Now, I don't believe we have the right to do that, but do we?
That's a very good question. If you live in Manhattan and the Bronx, the answer is clearly yes, you have the right to do it. If you live in Westchester, the answer is not quite as clear. There's no appellate division case on point to refute the first department. The first department is Manhattan and the Bronx, the second department is Westchester, Brooklyn, Queens, Rockland, there's a few other counties. In any event, so there's no second department appellate division case on point to refute the first department case. There is, however, a lower court case, which in New York State is the Supreme Court. There is a Supreme Court case in Westchester that does hold otherwise. So the answer is that you can, keeping in mind that there's no guarantee that if the person decides to litigate that issue, I couldn't tell you whether they would actually win or not. The lower court, they would probably win, that if you really wanted to push it, you wanted to appeal it to the appellate division, I'm not sure whether the second department would actually agree with the first department, or whether they would have their own opinion. And if they had their own opinion, then you might have a really good case to go to the Court of Appeals to try to make law for the whole state of New York.
How much does that cost?
You know, I'd be happy to do it.
Okay, folks, thank you all so very much. Let's have a nice round of applause for David Amster, Jason, Schiciano, a great presentation. Thank you all for coming.